Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the Qibla Controversy series. This is Al Fadi, and with me here in studio is Dr. Jay Smith. And we are going to continue basically today to unpack the response of Dr. David King's against those that disagree with his research and his findings. Last week we talked about his response towards the revisionist, and we used, Winsborough and also his students, Michael Cook, Dr. Cook, and also Dr. Patricia Crone. And today we are going to highlight his response towards our dear brother Dan Gibson. And the responses are, you can find those actually right here in this document, about 52 pages, I believe, where Dr. King invests basically his effort throughout these pages not to really offer anything new, rather offering theories and also scathing rebuke of Dan Gibson, and coming from him as the foremost authority in the topic of Qibla is rather alarming, as you will see shortly here. Dr. J, I'm thankful, of course, for you to join me here, and even thankful for the fact that we are investing this time and effort to compare and contrast these different views. But what we're about to embark on today is a little bit alarming, is beyond what you and I would expect from an academic field.
No, not an academia. And to be fair, this is unique to the Islamic world. You don't find this kind of vitriol, I think, in other areas of academia. I certainly, if you criticize Christianity or if you criticize the Bible or you criticize Jesus, there will be a response. But it's nothing vitriol.
Exactly,
no one takes down their character or uses ad hominem or uses this emotive kind of language that we're seeing Dr. King use here. But there seems to be a chord has been hit. He has really, a nerve has been hit and King is reacting to that. And what I like to do is just go through some of the things he says about Gibson. Right. And then what I would like to do, because I would like to defend Gibson in every one of these, and I think you and I can discuss it. And the first one he comes up with, he says that Gibson has no qualification. He doesn't have a doctorate. And then he says he hasn't sat under my tutelage. He didn't quote my books. It's very clear that he didn't go to where I went to. He didn't study under Dr. Kennedy like I did. It was almost like me. Why am I not there? Why is he not quoting me? It was almost like, am I not working? So what are his qualifications? Oh, he doesn't have a doctorate. He doesn't have a master's. He doesn't even have any qualification in this area.
So what if he quoted him? Would that been okay?
Well, Gibson does respond to that in his video, and he says, well, actually, I do quote you, I do refer to you, and I actually source your material in the bibliography. The thing is, I'm very clear, I say very clearly that anybody that only goes to 9th, 10th, and 11th century scholars for what was happening in the 7th and 8th century is, first of all, in the wrong area. They're much too late, but I don't trust those 9th, 10th, and century, because here they are. They look at all my books. I've got 10,000 in my library. I've read the very same books that King has read. I've gone through them, and I've pretty much discarded them because they're much too late. More than that, they even admit themselves they're not sure what's going on. They start out from the premise, we don't know why these Qiblas are not facing Mecca, why they're facing in so many other directions. It doesn't turn out that they are so many directions. It's only 3 other directions outside of Mecca. But because of the fact that I have found where these other directions are, and I can see that they follow a pattern, and I can see that pattern also makes sense historically, I didn't want to invest that much time with Dr. King, because Dr. King did not do what any good academic should do. He didn't go to the situation. He didn't go and actually walk in those mosques. He didn't even look where the Qibla walls were. He didn't look to see where they were directed, nor did he ever look and ask what was happening politically to understand why these Qiblas were not facing. So what were his qualifications? Well, he didn't have a doctorate, that's true. He had 25 years living amongst the Bedouin, 25 years speaking their language, 25 years going from mosque to mosque to mosque to mosque and measuring everyone. What did King do? Did King live amongst the Bedouin? No. Did King spend 25 years invested in those towns and in those mosques? No. Did he go to any of those mosques? One, Samarkand. If he is the world authority on this, how can he be sitting his time there in England, in his office at his university, and come up with all these theories that are based on 9th, 10th, and 9th, 10th, and 11th century scholars, which are all in them of themselves, nothing more than theories.
I mean, it's really mind-boggling to me that the foremost authority on something like this went to only one mosque. That was a huge surprise to me, actually.
That's right. Here's another quote. King says of Gibson, he has no understanding, he, meaning Gibson, has no understanding of the fact that modern directions from one place to another cannot be used to investigate the reasons underlying the orientation of pre-modern architecture. Now stop and unpack that a little bit. Who are we, is what he's saying. How can we use modern directions, in other words, like GPS or Aster satellites and all these modern apparatus,
to try to justify or unjustify something in the past?
That's right, to try to justify something in the past when they would not have had access to that kind of thing. So therefore, why are you even using that, since there's no way that they could have used that kind of material in the 6th and 7th century? What do you see? What's the problem there?
Well, the problem is he himself is using later things to justify earlier, conclusions.
It's a contradiction, because
Exactly.
you can say the same thing of him. In fact, and that is not what Gibson is doing to begin with. It's actually King who is making that problem. It's King who is saying, quoting the 9th, 10th, 11th scholars who do know of mosques that do use the solstice line and do use the equinox lines, who do use this, what he talks about as pre-plans or underlaying plans of roads and also other structures that are there, who are going to Mecca and looking at the line of the different walls of the Kaaba and saying that they parallel the line of this mosque or that mosque in this city or that country. They are the ones who are actually taking later discoveries of their own and imposing it onto the 6th and 7th century, and King's quoting them. So if anybody is to be lambasted for this, he should lambast himself. This is his problem, and it is his unique problem, that because he did not at all look and see that they didn't use solstice line. They were not using equinox line. By the way, when you go up on and look at the tools that Dan Gibson has up there on his website, he puts the solstice and equinox line he overlays on all the mosques now, and they are the purple to the kind of bluish lines, to prove that none of these, except possibly one or two, are even close to the solstice or the equinox.
But I mean, one would argue that despite the fact that these guys, when they built these mosques, didn't have the technology that we have today, they were pretty darn close. I mean, within degrees.
And that's what Gibson does. Gibson doesn't take modern technology and impose and say that's why these people use this kind of technology. He didn't do that at all. Why did he use the Aster satellite? Why did he use GPS? Why did he use GPS coordinates? To show how accurate they were. These were nothing more to measure today to prove that these actually were the most accurate. That's how he knows that not only the between mosques, which are under a degree within accuracy, or the Petrin mosques, which are within 2 degrees of accuracy, or the parallel mosques, which are within little over 3 degrees of accuracy, are all more accurate than the Meccan mosques, which are over 4 degrees of accuracy. Right. The worst ones, the ones that actually should have been the most accurate using mathematics, were the Meccan mosques, and the other 3 different categories of Qibla directions were all more accurate. And the reason that Gibson can even make that assumption or even make that claim is because he's using modern technology to do the coordinates. And that's all he used, the modern technology, just to back up what he was seeing. Why didn't King do that? Why has King still not done that?
Absolutely.
Why does King still not listen to what Gibson is saying? Why is King still calling him an amateur when, as an amateur, he's doing what King still be doing and should be doing? And if King is in retirement now, which means he's not going to be around much longer, shouldn't that be his legacy? Shouldn't he leave behind for everybody to know that, hey, I got it wrong, but here's the new material. This is actually now makes sense.
Shouldn't you have some of his students use technology today called airplane and other things to go and find out for us?
Okay, getting back, and you're now being facetious, because this is exactly what we do. In fact, even the fact that he got to Samarkand means he had had to use an airplane to get there. Modern technology to go and look at something. Now, let's go to the next quote. He says, Gibson seems oblivious to the fact that there is a well-established discipline called archaeoastronomy and has no understanding of astronomical alignments. Now, let me just tell you what Gibson's reply to this was. He says, yes, I do. I've got all the books right here. I've got the same books you've got. I've read them all. I realized that this whole archaeoastronomy was only created in the 9th, 10th, and 11th century to try to understand what had happened in the 7th and 8th century.
So their attempt was just to decipher how these earlier ones were really functioning in such a fashion.
And they were being honest.
Yeah.
They were honestly concerned. They were honestly perplexed. They didn't understand how these guys get all the rocks, all the Qiblas wrong. Turns out they weren't getting the Qiblas wrong. They just they weren't looking at the history that had gone on. So here's what's interesting. When he lambasts Gibson for not understanding this, he doesn't even know what Gibson has read or doesn't read. He hasn't even read Gibson's book because Gibson refers to this. I do. He knows exactly what the solstice lines were. He knows the equinox argument. He knows all the sunsets and the sunrises. He knows all these arguments. He knows the lines that are supposedly parallel to the Qibla.
He's an archaeologist.
He's an archaeologist. He's heard these theories. He already has he's debunked them because they're too late. In the same reason you and I would debunk them. They are too late and they don't fit with what has been found on the ground. These 4 directions of Qibla make absolutely sense, but the 9th, 10th, 11th century scholars did not know about this because they didn't do what Gibson did, and neither did King do what Gibson did.
That's fascinating. Anything else?
Yeah.
You would like
Gibson
to add?
doesn't know anything about mosque construction, he says. Now, Gibson's response, she says, have you read my books? Did you even read my books? Did you even look to see? I talk about mosque constructions all the time. He says that's one of the main things that I spent an enormous amount of time on. He wrote many books on, he read many books on mosque construction, including all of Creswell's books. He's read all of Creswell's books, who is also the one that King uses. They read the same books. He knows all about it. The problem is that none of these books actually quote the 7th and 8th scholars, 7th and 8th century scholars. They only quote the 9th, 10th, 11th. Again, it's the same problem. You're much too late. You're going to the wrong era. You're going to a much more different era, which did use mathematics, and that's why Gibson loves mathematics, but that's not what the earlier scholars did. They used the stars. They used astronomy. And then he quotes this. Gibson has no control over any of the numerous medieval Arabic sources, legal, astronomical, folk astronomical, mathematical, geographical, relating to the determination of the Qibla. Gibson kind of laughs when he reads that, and he says, I don't. You want to look at my library here? 10,000 books, all of them I've read. 25 years I've spent reading all this. You're saying I don't know any about this? Says, why do you think I got all these books? Why did I invest so much money in all these books? Why is it that I spent 25 years, that was 25 years in 2004, and we're now in 2019. So you can see we're talking about another 15 years on top of that. So we're talking about almost 40 years he spent invested in this. You cannot say he had not read this material. He is probably, he's a lot more versant with this material than I think King is.
It's obvious to me.
Okay, and then he says, Gibson should not have chosen Petra for his location of the early Kaaba, because in Petra, in the early 7th century, there was no Arabs, there were no Muslims, there were no Jews, and in brief, there was not much going on.
I think that's for you and I to unpack this, right? You know?
Oh dear, I had to laugh at that one. I don't know if he's just not aware of the Nabatean area. He probably is not, because he doesn't really care about the Nabatean. He probably was not even. He probably is. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what King's getting at there. I mean, to me, that's just down ignorance on King's part. To say that there was nothing going on in Neswith there, that Petra, on those beautiful rock, those buildings that have been carved into the rock, that everybody, that the tourism that goes on there, are you saying these people were not important? Are you saying those beautiful water channels that we see there? What we're going to find out is they were one of the most sophisticated empires ever probably that we've ever known. They are one of the wonders of the world. Are you saying that no one knew about this? Are you saying from the 2nd century BC up until 8th century AD, they controlled all the commerce around the world? Are you saying King didn't know anything about this? Are you saying that there were no Arabs or Muslims or no Jews? And in brief,
the Chinese knew about him.
The Chinese knew about him. I would suggest there were no Muslims is correct.
I mean, nobody is really claiming. I don't think Gibson is claiming that there were Muslims in there, but he's saying that's the start of the whole movement.
No, he's very clear. Gibson never said there are Muslims, because Muslims don't really come into the picture until 691. That's the late 7th century. So that would be correct. But Gibson's never claiming that there were Muslims. He said that they called themselves completely different names. Haras, Hagarenes, they call themselves Ishmaelites. They call themselves Hajurun, people of the Exodus, who are moving from one place to another. They call themselves Maghrebs and Saracens. These are the names they give themselves.
Right.
So that would be clear. But to say that none of these people existed and this place was just a backward place, absolutely not. These people were sophisticated, and that's why even today we marvel at what they're able to do. We're going to get into a whole series of what they did have, but that's next.
And it appears that he doesn't know anything about the geography in the Quran, because the Quran gives credit to them as well.
That's right. Talmud, 24 times.
And that's what started the whole thing about the
Talmud,
Quranic geography book.
24 times.
Right.
What is King going to do with that? Even the Quran is crediting them.
That's right.
Then he goes on and says that he gets, let me just do this one here. Gibson's work has contributed to dubious causes. What does he mean by that? Dubious causes. And Gibson asks, what dubious causes are you talking about? What is it that you're saying that I've done that somehow this is going to be detrimental to this whole work? Isn't whatever you discover, any time that you cut something new, shouldn't you get that out into the open? Shouldn't we actually ask people what's going on? Shouldn't we actually try to understand it? Shouldn't we then try to go back and actually put it together from a historical perspective? What's dubious about this? That is what we know as historical work. That's good. Any good historian would do this. Any good archaeologist. So I would love to know. I'd love to know King what he means by that. And should anything that we put out there be peer reviewed?
I think, if I would take a shot at it, he's probably talking about you're opening a can of worms right now about things that shouldn't be discussed out in the public.
We're going to get to that, but before that, in fact, we might have to do a whole episode just on that. But let's just finish these quotes, because this is interesting, because then he comes up with this.
And I think we should really come back and wrap it up with just an assessment of all of this.
He says, more seriously, Gibson's writings are guaranteed to contribute to Islamophobia amongst those who have no idea about the one and only civilization which really took orientation seriously for over 1,400 years.
Now, why is that a problem? I'm not so sure, really.
First of all, what do you mean by Islamophobia?
Exactly.
Hatred of Muslims?
Exactly.
What King has found
the academic work has anything to do with that?
What does that have to do with hatred of Muslims or hatred of Islam? Where is this Islamophobia? To me, this is really incredulous that he's coming up with this claim.
I think what I'm hearing him say is, like, if you're a scholar out there doing studies on in the Islamic field or early Islamic field, if you find something that contradicts the tradition, don't bring it up. So basically, he's saying my whole career has been to support the narrative. Exactly.
My whole career has been to support the classical narrative. Muslims have been clapping me on the back and have given me all kinds of accolades, which is true. King gets an enormous amount of accolades from Muslims, from non-Muslims, you name it. He's never gets anybody. I don't know of anybody that's been critical until Gibson came up, but then Gibson never was critical of King at all. He didn't say anything about King. I mean, the fact that he didn't say anything about King, King's getting upset with.
That's true.
But can you then understand, if you then dare to question Islam's narrative, the classical narrative, suddenly you're an Islamophobe. Who usually says that?
I mean, Muslims say that.
Muslims say that.
Exactly.
What is a Western academic saying that?
And so basically what I'm saying is King's basically, we're going to call it the King's model, is that if you're finding contradict the traditional Islamic, dating or data, then don't bring it out in the open, because you are becoming an Islamophobe and you hate Muslims. So maybe we shouldn't be in the academic field then, if that's the case.
Well, I'm going to I think we need to shut this one down there and come up with his final quote, because his final quote actually needs to be unpacked because it leads into many different areas. But you can see he has a hatred for anybody that stands against him. We saw from the episode before that he has a hatred towards the revisionist school, particularly aimed at Wansboro and Patricia Krone and also Dr. Michael Cook. He has an enormous amount of vitriol against Gibson. I just gave you a few quotes there just to underline that he thinks that Gibson has not done his work, when Gibson has done way more work than King has ever done that I can see.
It's very evident from the data that you see in his books.
Absolutely, that he does not think that he has any qualifications. He doesn't have a PhD. He hasn't studied under him as the world
authority. Could you
authority.
really grab the two books, if you don't mind? Grab his two books. And just turn him to the side so people can see the size of these two books. Look at the size of these two books. Now look at the size of the refutation of these two books.
And it's a third book. I say it's two other books on top of this.
That's right.
The Nabateans and one just on Petra itself. So there's 4 books versus this paper. Now, to be fair, this is not his only work. This is a critique of this material.
That's what I mean. I mean, refuting this kind of work with 52 pages only, without even, like you said, taking advantage of technology today, and maybe either go in himself or send in some of his delegates to go there and just verify. Why doesn't he go and just verify what Gibson is doing and pinpoint, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, you're wrong here, and here's why you're wrong?
Yeah, and to be fair, of the 52 pages, maybe I'm just guessing about 10 to 15 pages he does that. All the others are attacking Gibson and basically saying, look at me, look at me, look at me. It's very much, lots of ego is in this paper. Bruised
pretty
ego
sad.
is in this paper.
Really pretty sad.
Understandable. He has been bruised. He is older. He is retired. He doesn't have, how can he go back and redo everything that he is, rewrite everything that he has written? You can see this is a man who's desperate.
Yep.
This is a man who is desperate to maintain a legacy. He wants to make sure that other people read his books, other people. What's fascinating is writing a paper like this will not do that. Writing a paper like this, I would say to Dr. King, you have actually blown yourself in the foot. Don't do this. And anybody else who is serious about academic integrity, please don't write papers like this. This does not help your cause. If anything, it wounds you and it makes you look ridiculous.
Well, why don't we hold off until the next episode, which is the conclusion. We'll start with his own conclusion, and then we'll start unpacking this dangerous trend that I'm seeing. If you are in the field of early Islamic studies or Islamic studies in general, and you find something that is contradictory to the comfort zone, if you wish, then you are name-called and labeled in different ways.
Yeah.
Well, hopefully everybody's enjoying this series. You can see why we called it the Qibla Controversy, and you can even notice and sense the controversy that has taken place already. Until we meet again, have a blessed day. Thank you for watching. Please like our video, and we encourage you to subscribe to our YouTube channel, Sira International. And be sure also to click the bell so that you receive notifications whenever we upload new videos into the channel. And finally, I like to prayerfully encourage you to become a patron through Patreon. Your giving is much needed and will enable us to produce more and more of videos like this so that we can publish them on a weekly basis. So thank you in advance.